If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Welcome to Candid Motherhood with Roxy and Jackie, talking everything about your motherhood topics, the good, the bad, the ugly, what to expect and what not to expect. So grab your coffee, grab your energy drinks, put on some pajamas, relax, and get ready for some real talk. Welcome to our podcast.
So our first topic for today is all about being pregnant, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the first question that we have is, how did you know that you were pregnant?
Well, for me, I found out by taking a pregnancy test, of course. But the reason why I took the pregnancy test was because I was 2 days late on my period. So that is what prompted me to take my test. And lo and behold, it came out positive. What about you?
Me and Rob went out for the Super Bowl Sunday and we got a little tipsy and we planned for the baby. And next thing you know, we're pregnant. Like you said, you took a pregnancy test. I took a pregnancy test. I mean, I had some symptoms, like I was feeling sick and like sore. So I kind of knew, but that's how we found out with the first one. With the second one, it was kind of the same. I mean, not the drunk part, but we planned for the second pregnancy and we got pregnant. But the first pregnancy was way different than the second pregnancy. I don't know about yours.
Well, for me, when I found out I was pregnant the second time around, it was planned. So I was kind of expecting that to be positive. But for the third one, that was a little bit of a surprise to me. We weren't actually trying. But we actually weren't not trying. So I don't know. But it's funny because the third pregnancy, me and my sister both found out we were pregnant about 3 weeks away from each other. So that was pretty fun to be pregnant together with my sister. But yes, I also did have some symptoms. I don't really have too many symptoms when I get pregnant, but I did have like the sore boobs and I was losing weight and I was having cravings, like especially with my first pregnancy, I was craving a lot of grilled cheese sandwiches. And I was totally turned off to like any kind of fish. Tuna fish would make me gag. Yeah. And I remember one night I was cooking meat and I almost threw up. So those were all red flags for me that something's up.
Yeah. Speaking of, pregnancy symptoms, I feel like there are a lot that, a lot of people don't realize when they say morning sickness, it's not just the morning, it's all day sickness. And
it could be, yeah.
Yeah. And it could be for your entire pregnancy too, not just for your first trimester. I mean, thankfully enough, I was good after 3 months, but I was sick, and it's an all day sickness, not just in the morning.
I also used to get sick after eating certain foods, like Chinese food would make me really sick. I would throw up after I ate that. Or like I said before, tuna fish would make me sick. And I found that for some reason in my third pregnancy, I was a lot sicker than in my other pregnancies. I'm not sure why, but for some reason, my third baby made me so sick.
Yeah. I found these seasickness bands and you wear them and they put pressure points on your acupuncture points to relieve nausea. So I used those when I was pregnant. So those were really helpful. But other than that, I mean, your cravings really changed. I mean, my first pregnancy, all I wanted was junk food all day long.
Yes, it does change a lot. With my first, I don't know why I was craving so much cheese. I just wanted anything with cheese, pizza, grilled cheese, mac and cheese. But then, my second pregnancy, I was craving a lot more healthy foods like cucumbers and strawberries. For some reason, were one of my cravings. With the third, I kind of got lucky. I didn't really crave all that much, but with the sickness also, I would say I had more food aversions. But like you said about the bands, I used to relieve my sickness, I would actually buy some fresh ginger. I would slice off some pieces and I would just suck on them.
So what other symptoms or cravings or things like that did you have that other people, would want to know about when they're pregnant? Because I know no one told me anything when I was pregnant, and I wish somebody did, so you can be more prepared.
Well, one thing I would say is, even though you're craving something, you shouldn't give in 100% of the time, because it's really easy to gain weight that way. I remember when my first pregnancy, I would just give in to all my cravings. So if I was craving McDonald's, I would go and get McDonald's. But, the weight added on really quickly after that. And it's really hard to come off afterwards. So that's hard. One thing I would recommend.
And when you have another child, it's even harder to take the weight off.
Yes. Every pregnancy, it gets even harder and harder. Your metabolism gets slower and slower. And so the best thing is to try to watch your weight while you're pregnant so you don't get too big.
So besides, the pregnancy symptoms and cravings, let's talk about the awkwardness of doctor's appointments and how invasive being pregnant is.
Yes. And there are a lot of doctor's appointments when you're pregnant. In the beginning, it goes like about once a month. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the second trimester, it goes to about once every 2 weeks. Right? Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been a while.
Once a week when you get
and then once a week,
about a month out. But not even that. Your first doctor's appointment usually is an internal sonogram, which I had no idea even existed. So when I got there and they were like, drop trowel, we're going to shove something up you to see the baby. I'm like, excuse me, you're going to do what? So that was new for me. I don't know how many people actually know that's what happens.
That is pretty awkward. I actually did not have that happen to me. I like to do more natural approaches. So the less invasive, the better for me. And I was kind of lucky since I didn't have any high risk pregnancies. I was able to keep it as natural as possible. And I even was able to do a home birth for my third pregnancy, which was, listen, if you can get a home birth, that is for me the best thing I've ever done for myself.
You're brave.
The best, but
I don't know if I could do a home birth. I don't know.
You could. You don't think you can, but you can.
I mean, I probably could, I probably could if I tried, but just the thought is terrifying. I mean, I know with my first delivery, it didn't go so well, and the doctors had to cut the umbilical cord. It was wrapped around his neck.
My daughter had the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck as well. But I asked them not to cut it right away. It's still in the hospital though. They have a whole new set of rules than they do when you're giving birth at home. So that's what I really enjoyed about the home birth, is that everything was my way. It wasn't about what the doctors say.
Yeah. See, I feel like, you had the experience of having a midwife and home birth, where I had both kids in a doctor's office, and I didn't have a greatest experience with the first doctor. So when I got pregnant for the second time, I switched doctors, and I not realizing that this was a infertility doctor, which that's fine. But they treated me as if I was infertile. So that I didn't really like too much. They had me take certain medications and things like that to try and get me to keep the pregnancy. So that was definitely more invasive than a midwife,
That is a little strange to me. If you're already pregnant, you're obviously fertile. So
yeah. And the nurse practitioner actually told me that I wasn't pregnant and I must have had a miscarriage, because there's no possible way I could know when I conceived a child. And that's when Rob looked at her and said, I'm pretty sure I know when it happens, you know?
That's funny.
So it was just that I was so early on in the pregnancy that they couldn't really detect anything. Nothing showed up in a sonogram, just like a faint trace, you know, when you take a urine test.
Yes.
But look at now, I have a 6-year-old girl who apparently I miscarried.
Well, let's go back to the awkwardness of the doctor's appointments. So going to the doctor's appointments when you have to put your legs up on the stirrups, how awkward can that get?
Worst ever. And then they tell you, scoot down, keep going. You're like, lady, come on here. Like, where am I going? I'm going to show you everything.
Oh yeah, there is no hiding anything when you're pregnant.
Not at all. And the worst part, I think, for me was when I was induced with my labor. That was so painful and so invasive. I still have PTSD about it.
The worst part for me at the appointments was those forceps that they put up there. Those were the most uncomfortable things I've ever experienced.
That could be a totally another topic, gynecologist appointments.
Oh yeah. And then
really, truly though, pregnancy, like you got this human growing inside of you that's invading your space and, you know, for 10 months, and then you birth them and they invade your space for the rest of your life.
Oh, ain't that the truth?
Can't get rid of these.
Why don't we talk about how our body changes throughout pregnancy? Okay. Because I feel like I went into pregnancy like thin and I didn't have much of boobs, I would say. But then when you come out of pregnancy, man, your boobs, they grow like 3 sizes. You got hips that you didn't have before.
See, I had a little different experience because I wasn't a thin person, you know, growing up or pretty much ever. And so I went into pregnancy being overweight and I gained a bunch of weight during the pregnancy. I mean, not as much as my second pregnancy. That was like the tipping point, the heaviest I ever weighed in my life. And, but your body changes afterwards. I mean, your belly's all deflated and jiggly and your boobs are big. And I mean, for myself, I couldn't breastfeed because I never really got any milk for some reason. And Nathan never wanted to breastfeed. And I remember being in the hospital and I was in a Catholic hospital and they make you feel guilty for trying to bottle feed your child. Don't let them make you feel guilty because your child needs to eat. So however you get the food to them, you know?
Yes. Well, with my first child, I did not breastfeed. I tried, but it just was not working out. I also feel like with the first, you're inexperienced. You don't know what you're doing. The baby doesn't know what she's doing. So I think it's a learning experience with that, because by the time I got to my second and third, it was much better. So with my third, I'm actually still breastfeeding and he's about to be 2. So that could be a whole new topic in itself, to be honest with you. Breastfeeding, that could be a whole new topic.
See, that's
but besides the breastfeeding part, besides the breastfeeding part, like just your body just goes through so many changes. I know for myself, like I feel like I'm never going to be back to the weight that I was before I was pregnant, because I just feel like I would be way too small if I went back to that weight now.
Like, I feel like it's really critical to keep up with exercising while you're pregnant. You know, as much as you say, oh, you're pregnant, I can eat whatever I want because I'm pregnant. But, you know, it really, after you have the baby, it takes a long time to get back to your normal weight if you ever do. Because I know with, you know, 2 kids, it was harder and harder. And I started out, you know, before I had kids, I wasn't skinny, but I was in shape and I was in the gym. And now, not so much.
Yeah, well, the one thing I try to keep up with while I'm pregnant is walking, because that's probably the one thing that I could still do. Walking, or should we say waddling?
Exactly. Waddling with big swollen feet.
Yeah. That's another thing. The swollen feet. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And you think that they will just miraculously disappear after you give birth. You are wrong. They will stay around for a few weeks.
Mine actually got worse after I gave birth, to be honest.
Yes, definitely, for sure. Nobody tells you about your disgusting balloon feet. And actually, I only had that with Lacey. I did not have that with Nate. I don't know if that's like a boy girl thing.
I had it with my daughter real bad, but my sons weren't as bad. So I'm not sure. Maybe it is a boy girl thing, but I know that with my sons, I had more time to rest because when I was pregnant with Julie, I was working a lot. So maybe that had to do with it. I also wasn't eating the healthiest.
Yeah, that's another thing too, is I know my first pregnancy, I was working full time and I worked literally up until I gave birth. I worked that night until 10 o'clock. I gave birth at 3 a.m. And the second one, I was still working full time, but I said, no. I'm taking 2 weeks off before my due date so I can just relax. And, you have a newborn already, or not a newborn, like a 1-year-old. And now you're about to have another newborn. So sleep is of the essence.
Oh, yes. I actually did the opposite of what you did. I took the 2 weeks off before with my first pregnancy, only because I've gotten so big. My body was not used to being that big, and I just could not handle being on my feet even 5 hours a day.
Yeah.
So my second pregnancy, I was a little more experienced. I worked full time, and I worked literally up until my due date too. I actually had to call out of work that morning because my water had broke the morning, like 3 hours before my shift started. But it's nice both ways because then you don't lose out on your maternity leave.
Yeah. Thankfully we were able to have maternity leaves for both my pregnancies.
Yes, I did have maternity leave for both of my pregnancies as well, but I decided after my second son was born to not go back to work after my maternity leave. Just because one, I feel like I couldn't leave him. He was still so little. And two, it was going to cost us more in childcare for a baby that young than it would to just stop working and have my husband work more hours.
Yeah, see, the expectation of going back to work after 3 months, I think, is a little rough because at 3 months as a baby, you still need a lot of attention. And then to have your mother be gone the majority of the day working really sucks. So I think that's where the maternity leaves kind of suck. And
also it takes the woman's body a long time, not just 3 months, to get back to the way it was pre-pregnancy. So I think to expect a mother to go back to work right after 3 months is just, it's not beneficial for either relationship, for you or the child.
See, both pregnancies, I actually went back a little early because my maternity leave didn't offer me any money. So, I was able to take off the 12 weeks, but I didn't really get paid and I couldn't afford to stay home anymore. So after the second one, I did go back to work for probably a good 5 years. And then Rob was a stay-at-home dad for that time frame. And he decided that he wanted to go to work full time. And I quit my job. I had a pretty good job as a store manager, and I quit to be a stay-at-home mom. And I've been home ever since. It's been almost 3 years. I do other things on the side, but we'll talk about that in another topic.
Working at home is definitely way more challenging than working as a store manager, because I as well was a store manager, and I feel like that job is so much easier than the job that I have here, being a full-time mother.
Definitely. I used to say all the time, like, I'm glad I'm going to work right now because I don't want to be home with 2 kids. It's too much work.
It almost feels like alone time when you're at work because you're actually with other adults. You don't need to break fights up all the time.
You can actually have a conversation with somebody and it's not goo goo gaga, did you poop yourself?
Well, that's a good that's a good intro to get into the dad's involvement in parenting and in pregnancy, especially because the woman is the one that carries the baby. So sometimes it's easy for the man to even forget that he's having a baby.
Yeah. I mean, I know like they have all those books and everything that you can read. And I know when we were first pregnant, we went to Lamaze class. Total waste of money. Do not go to Lamaze class. Waste of money. I mean, I was looking at this woman like, is she for real? She wants me to breathe like while I'm pregnant. Come on. Like, I'm trying to have a baby. So I just thought that was totally pointless. And there's really not a lot of information out there for men. You can buy those books and everything, but nothing's really going to prepare you until you actually have a kid. And hopefully your husband is pretty hands-on like ours were.
So I think that some ways to get dads involved would be to have him come to a lot of the doctor's appointments with you. I think that especially hearing that baby's heartbeat, that really makes it real for both of you, but especially for the guy, because you can actually feel the baby move inside of you, but he can't. So being able to hear it, seeing it on the sonogram, those are things that I really feel like dad should be involved in.
Yeah. You know, maybe we have to find somebody that recently had a baby or is pregnant to know what it's like going to the doctors during COVID.
That's true. I can't even imagine being pregnant right now during COVID. Actually, my sister is pregnant right now. And so maybe, I can speak through her experience.
Yeah, maybe we can interview her one day.
Yeah. She can't have anybody in the room with her. She can have only one person, but because she already has 2 kids, she can't just she's not even allowed to bring her 2 small kids in with her to the doctor's appointment. So often her husband has to stay home with the kids and she has to go alone. So it's not been fun for her.
See, I feel like even between the 2 births that I had, I didn't have them very far apart. They're 21 months apart, but things changed even then. My first, Nate was behind the glass like you would see in the movies, during visiting hours. Nobody was allowed to touch him or anything like that. But then with the second baby, you had the baby 24/7. There was no behind the glass, no looking during visiting hours. The parents were there with the baby and, you were allowed whoever to come during visiting hours. So now just having to deal with no one being there and supporting you is probably scary.
It's very scary, especially if, you have a pregnancy that's not so smooth like ours were, and you have some type of complication. It's scary to find that out and be alone.
Yeah. So I think that we covered a lot of topics. I think maybe our next podcast, maybe we'll talk about labor and delivery, because that could be a whole hour-long segment in itself.
Oh, yeah. We have plenty of stories for that with all the babies we've had.
Thank you so much for listening to Candid Motherhood Podcast.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please subscribe, share, and rate our podcast.
If you have any ideas for future episodes or want to learn more about us, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram at candid.motherhood and on Twitter at @cmotherhood.
We appreciate your love and support. Until next time, thank you, Candid Mamas.